July 15th, 2024. Welcome again to a short instructional video courtesy of investingsuccess.ca. Today what I want to look at is a conjunction that is occurring right here, right now in front of us, and it is the conjunction between Mars and the planet Uranus. And you can see on this chart here that it is occurring right here, right now, around 24, 26 degrees of Taurus. Now, this conjunction does not occur very often, only every couple years. And so when I see a conjunction that occurs only every couple years, the first question that pops into my mind is, hey, does this affect the markets? Well, today in this little video, we're going to explore that very issue, and we're going to see just what history has to tell us. So when we explore whether or not a conjunction affects the market, we have to start by looking at the first trade natal birth horoscope for whatever it is we are looking at. And so in this particular case, I'm going to look at the New York Stock Exchange as a whole. And we know that it was founded on the 17th of May, 1792, of course, in New York. And you can see that in this horoscope wheel, there's what I call a dog tooth or a sawtooth pattern. And it looks like something that you would see on a saw or a dog's tooth. Now, the corners are comprised of Sun, Pluto, Jupiter, and North Node. So then the question that I always like to ask is, what happens when things like Sun or Mars or Venus or even the Moon pass by these particular corner points of this dogtooth pattern? And that's the same general question then that Louise McWhorter posed way back in 1937 when she wrote her book about predicting turning points on the New York Stock Exchange. So now in the case of our planetary conjunction between Mars and Uranus, we said that it's occurring right here, right now, around 24 to 26 Taurus. Well, where does that place us then with respect to this natal horoscope wheel of the NYSE? Well, it places it basically right on top of the natal sun, which is at one of the corner points of this dogtooth pattern. So does that mean that we're going to see a dramatic response on the overall S&P or the overall Dow? Well, they certainly are up this morning as I'm recording this video. And so potentially one could argue that this transit of these two planets is sort of giving fuel to the fire, if you will, and sort of extending the rally that has been going on. However, I do want to point out a couple things. In the first trade horoscope of the NYSE, the midheaven is at 24 of Pisces. Now, this transit, this conjunction between Mars and Uranus is 60 degrees away. So if it were at the actual midheaven, then I would really sit up in my chair and urge people to really pay attention. Likewise, the event between Mars and Uranus is a fair ways away from the natal ascendant at 14 of Cancer. If it were at that 14 of Cancer point, I again would be sitting up in my chair and advising people to really pay attention. So all we can do is to say that, yeah, Mars and Uranus are conjunct. Yes, it's occurring at 24 degrees or so of Taurus. Yes, that is right almost on top of the New York Stock Exchange natal sun. Therefore, one needs to be alert to potential changes in trend. I can't really quantify it. I can't really guarantee it. We just have to be alert to the changes in trend and the possibility thereof. Now, let's go back and see what history has to say about transits just like this. I have a piece of software called SolarFire Gold, and I use it to do a lot of calculations and figuring on the financial markets. So, for example, I said to SolarFire Gold, tell me all of the dates when Mars and Uranus were conjunct. But more importantly, I want you to narrow that down, and I want you to tell me when those conjunctions occurred in the sign of Pisces. In other words, when did those conjunctions occur near the New York Stock Exchange natal midheaven? And there was a series of dates that came back. The first one in 2003. And you can see that in March of 03, the market started to rally all through March, April, May, and into June, just as Mars and Uranus made that conjunction in the sign of Taurus near the natal midheaven. The market went to sleep. It just fell into a sideways consolidation pattern. And so could you argue then that that conjunction in or near the natal midheaven had an impact on the markets? Yep, I think you can make that argument. The next date that came up was in the middle of May 2005. And you can see on this chart that starting in early March of 05, the S&P started to decline, and it fell, and it tried to recover a bit, and it fell again. And during the month of April, it tried to carve out a bottom of some sort, and it gave one final push to the downside in the middle of May, and then it took off and rallied hard right through till nearly the end of June. So that final push to the downside, what was that? Well, that was your Mars-Uranus conjunction in the sign of Pisces near that NYSE natal midheaven. So again, can we argue that that conjunction near the natal midheaven had an impact on the markets? Yeah, I think we can make that argument. Now, there's another event in 2007, and it actually occurred late in April. And so you can see from this chart that in early March of 07, the market started to rally fairly stealthily. And along comes the Mars-Uranus conjunction at or near that midheaven point. And look what happened shortly thereafter. Market sort of runs out of steam a little bit, and it starts to make this volatile topping pattern, which ultimately couldn't press much higher a couple months later, and it fell apart. This was the opening chapters then of what would be known as the Great Financial Crisis. So can we argue that that conjunction in the sign of Pisces near the natal midheaven had a bearing on the markets? Yeah, I think we can probably say that this was something that people needed to be alert to, because shortly thereafter things started to get a little wonky on the New York Stock Exchange. And there is one final date that the Solar Fire Gold program brought my attention to. We know that markets were coming down pretty hard in 08 towards the latter part of this great financial crisis. We know that the market bottomed in March of 09, and in April of 09, we had Mars and Uranus conjunct, and again in the sign of Pisces near that natal midheaven. And what happened after that? Well, there was no doubt about it. The market had bottomed, and it pressed higher, and it did so fairly quickly. And it had a little setback in the month of July of 09, but then it just kept powering higher. So can we argue that this conjunction in the sign of Pisces had a bearing on the markets? Yes, we can make that argument. There were a number of other factors at the same time, but I think we can say that this conjunction contributed then to the strength and the breadth of the overall market. Now, let's step away from the market. Let's take more of a personal position. Can this conjunction be used to give some sort of indication as to things that might happen to a person? I'm going to use an example of a particular person, and here's his picture. I don't need to introduce him. You know who he is. He was born June 14th, 1946 in New York City. And at the time of his birth, his natal midheaven was at 24 of Taurus. And his natal ascendant was at 29 of Leo. And what's interesting is if you go on to practically any astrology type website and ask for an interpretation of what people are like who are born with Mars at the ascendant point, boy, the descriptors that are used, and a lot of these descriptors predate Donald Trump's political aspirations. Yeah, he is a unique individual and very much in line with the personalities of people who were born with Mars at the ascendant. So now, what I want to figure out is there an impact on his personal life of this Mars-Uranus conjunction that's occurring right here, right now? Let's just see what we can figure out. Well, lo and behold, what do we have here? This is what we call a bi-wheel. And the inner part of this wheel are his natal birth planets. The outer part of the wheel are the planets right here, right now. And so, knowing that his natal midheaven was at 24 of Taurus, what do we see going on? Well, Mars and Uranus are conjunct right here, right now, at his natal midheaven. If this man was a stock, or if this man was a market index, I would say, pay attention. There's going to be a trend change. There's going to be something major that goes on. Well, he's not a stock and he's not an index. He's an individual human being. But boy, to have this conjunction at his natal midheaven, that sort of says that there is the propensity for something to happen. Maybe he cuts himself shaving. Maybe he trips over his shoelaces. Maybe he tries to run up the stairs and misses a step and falls on his face. Something's going to happen. Maybe he tries to cross the street and nearly gets hit by a car. Maybe he's on an airplane and the plane has to make an emergency landing. Well, we know now that he was giving a campaign speech in Butler, Pennsylvania, and an assassin pulled off a shot, and by the grace of God, he moved his head, apparently to get a better look at his teleprompter, and just by moving his head a half an inch, the bullet grazed his ear. Otherwise, it could have gone right through him. So can we argue that this particular Mars-Uranus conjunction at his natal midheaven was a sign of something bad to happen? Yeah, definitely. And like I say, he just as easily could have cut himself shaving. He just as easily could have tripped going up a set of stairs. Something was destined to happen. And it did. And unfortunately, it put America in a rather bad light. Taking out people that you disagree with politically is something that you would expect from a third world banana republic, not from the United States of America. This is actually a pretty overcast period of time right here and right now for the United States. And I'm not gonna get into the politics of it. I think you generally agree that we cannot go down this road. Let's leave it at that. Now, starting today, Monday, the RNC convention gets going in Milwaukee. But bear in mind that the Mars-Uranus conjunction is still in play. So come Thursday of this week, when the convention is wrapping up, those two planets will still be 2 degrees apart. It takes time for Mars to move. And Uranus is a very slow mover. So the propensity for something unexpected, unusual, bizarre to happen this week at the convention. Yep, there is that possibility. I'm not going to sit here and predict what can happen. Nobody can. And if somebody on a website or a blog starts predicting and saying that, oh yeah, they knew that was going to happen, no, they didn't. You can't be that accurate. But he has to name his running mate. The media has got it nailed down to, I think, 3 potential candidates. It would not be unusual. It would not be out of the scope of a Mars-Uranus conjunction for him to suddenly just shock everybody and name a running mate that nobody had expected. What would happen, for example, if he took the stage and said, yep, I'm naming Nikki Haley as my vice presidential running mate? Can you imagine the shock that the media would express? But that is the nature then of the Mars-Uranus transit. Expect the unexpected. Now, to give you another example, a lot of people are expecting him to, continue bashing Joe Biden for his age and his gaffes. Wouldn't it be something if Mr. Trump took the stage and started calling for a kinder, gentler America, an America where more respect is shown to people, where there's less violence? Boy, that would certainly be in keeping with the expect the unexpected theme of the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So this is going to be an interesting week at the convention, and all I can say is expect the unexpected. All right, so that concludes our look then at this conjunction, and the next one will be a couple years down the road, and we'll see just what happens then. I'm not going to go into details. You know where to find me. You know the books. You know the reports. But keep your eye on that RNC convention. Keep your eye on Mr. Trump. Expect the unexpected. This is going to be an interesting week. Talk to you soon. Thanks.